What is the best and worst exercise for building your triceps? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. I'm only going to be discussing the most popular triceps exercises and ranking them based on several categories, such as progressive overload, deep stretch, contraction, constant tension throughout the entire range of motion, and focus on the targeted muscle. Well, let's get into it. The first exercise that we're going to talk about is the close grip bench press. This is basically a modified version of the bench press where your hands are closer together and the wrists are starting over the shoulders as opposed to over the elbows. As for progressive overload, there's very high potential for progressive overload here. It's very easy to add weight to the bar. You can simply do that by adding plates in very tiny to very large increments. This is a pressing movement, so as we're going to see more of this, pressing movements unfortunately do not offer that much of a stretch to the tricep muscles. It's mostly focused on stretching and contraction of the chest muscles. And another reason is because during pressing movements, the elbows are locked in front of the body, whereas the triceps get a big stretch when the elbows are pointed overhead or the elbows are fully extended. Okay, and we'll talk more about that later on. Okay, the traction is pretty decent during this exercise. Again, a bunch of mechanical tension because you're using a barbell. You can add as much weight on you want, so that's not an issue with this exercise. Okay. As a focus on targeted muscle, this is a compound movement, so you're focusing on. It's a compound movement, so you're focused on chest and triceps and the shoulders. So overall, my thoughts on this exercise: the starting position puts the wrist in a uncomfortable position because they're so close together that leads to hyperextension of the wrist, which can increase risk of injury. Another problem with this exercise is that because the wrists are starting over the shoulders as opposed to over the elbow, you have a decreased mechanical advantage and decreased output that you can get from this exercise. Okay. So, and another thing is that there's not that much great of a stretch here. There's not that much isolation or focus on the targeted muscle. So for those reasons, I'm going to give the close grip bench press a C. Moving on to dumbbell kickbacks. This is a very popular tricep movement. People like to pick this exercise whenever they want to tone the triceps, whenever they're trying to lose arm fat. They think that doing a bunch of triceps kickbacks will help them with this exercise. Moving on to progressive overload is absolutely terrible. The arms are starting off in a fixed, literally glued position to the body. It's a unilateral movement. You're doing it only at one arm at a time, so you don't really get that benefit, that like synergistic effect of having two muscles work together. This is essentially like the concentration curl for triceps because you're so overly strict on your form and the arms are glued to the sides. You tend to focus on a perfect form at the expense of overload. So it's very tiny weights. Whenever people do dumbbell kickbacks, they're normally using like 10 to 20 pounds. You rarely see somebody do dumbbell kickbacks get up to 40 pounds because this is not a mechanical advantage position for the triceps to be in. Okay. Moving on to stretch, there's no stretch in the bottom portion of the movement at all. And we know from recent research that stretch is very important to leading to more growth during your development and in your program. Again, there's no tension in the bottom half of the motion. So when the arm is pointing 90-degree angle to the ground, the triceps are not working at all. They're not being stretched or contracted. They're just staying in there. Okay, the contraction is subpar due to minimum overload. What does that mean? This means that because the form is so strict, and people think that being super strict is growth, not all the case. Okay, again, what grows muscle is the overload. The form is so strict that keeping the arms to the body limits the weight that you can use, and as going forward, that less weight equals less tension equals less contraction or subpar contraction. Okay, the weights are so tiny that this is essentially a warm-up exercise for the triceps. Because if somebody does like close grip bench press and they do like maybe 200 pounds and then they move on to dumbbell kickbacks and then they're doing 10 to 20 pounds, then they're not getting much of a workout from that. Okay, so constant tension, there's absolutely no tension in the bottom half of this motion at all. It's one of the worst exercise as far as maintaining constant tension. Again, as soon as the elbows are pointed straight towards the ground, where the forearms are perpendicular to the ground. There's no tension on triceps because they're literally just hanging there. Okay. Overall, this is a terrible choice for exercise. I wouldn't recommend it for any type of program. There's very low chance for progressive overload. There's not that many people that I believe that can build up their triceps doing this exercise. There's no stretch on the bottom portion of the motion. You have a subpar contraction. I'm going to give this one a D. Okay, moving on to rope pushdowns. This is normally a movement that people select when they're trying to build up the lateral head of the triceps, which gives the triceps that horseshoe appearance. There's a decent transfer overload here because you're doing these on the cable machines. Cable machines are almost always a great choice for a bodybuilding program because you're getting constant tension throughout the entire range of motion, which is in direct contrast to dumbbell kickbacks like we just talked about, okay? The contraction is pretty good here. Again, the movement of the exercise puts a lot of tension on the lateral head of the triceps. You know, unlike dumbbell kickback, you can do this, you can very easily progressively overload. You can do 100 pounds, you can do 150 pounds. And because you're doing both arms at the same time, it's very, very easy for you to be progressed. And since the movement isn't super strict and allows for some type of cheating, you do get a little bit of progressive overload and a little bit of mechanical advantage doing this exercise. So the contraction overall decent, especially during lockout, which really hits the lateral heads really hard. Overall, this is a great exercise. One of the best movements to target the lateral head of the triceps. And the use of cables, like I just said, creates constant tension. And there also is a great contraction and a great stretch. I would definitely recommend this program, this exercise for any triceps building program. And I'm going to give this one a B. Okay, dips. Okay, this is basically the compound movement for the arms or the upper body. Okay. And this is also known as the squat for the triceps. And I agree 1,000%, okay? It can be modified to target the chest or the triceps more depending on how you do it. But one important note for the dips is that you have to do them on a dip machine. You can't do them on a free weight because then you have to use plates to increase the progressive overload. And that kind of takes away from the benefits of the exercise. So as progressive overload, this is a fantastic opportunity to overload the triceps. They call it a squat of the triceps because you're literally putting like the entire weight of the body on the triceps. So you're going to super overload the triceps and force them to grow, okay? As for the stretch, again, unfortunately, pressing movements don't really stretch the triceps that much because the arms are locked in front of the body as opposed to overhead or in front of the anterior or exterior plane of the body. So those types of which you don't get with this, okay? Pressing movements don't really stretch the triceps or the arms that much, okay? You mostly get a stretch for the chest here, okay? The contraction, fantastic, and arguably the best of any type of tricep exercise, especially if you lock out, okay? You can modify this to change it up to target the chest by not locking out, but when you lock out, you're really gonna hit the triceps hard, okay? Full body weight on triceps provides great contraction for this exercise. Overall, this is a fantastic exercise for the triceps. It's the best contraction and it has the highest potential for mechanical tension, okay? And this definitely should be included in any mass building program. I think it's one of the top 2 best tricep exercises, and for that reason, I'm going to give this one an A. Diamond push-ups. So this is basically a popular variation of the traditional push-ups. It was very popular back into the day when bodybuilding was just trying to become a thing and people didn't know that much about the science. But during the exercise, basically the hands are so close together that they're literally touching. So as for progressive overload, there's not that much opportunity here. Against the progressive overload is basically capped out as body weight. When you start the exercise, that's great, but once you adjust to your body weight, there's nothing much you can do. And this basically has the same problem that the push-up has for chest. You basically get capped out at a point, and it's not really that beneficial at that point. Okay, so for stretch, again, pressing movements don't really stretch the arms or the triceps that much. So it's going to be minimal due to the fixed position of the elbows in front of the body. Contraction, average contraction, mechanical tension is capped off from body weight. And focus on target muscle, well, this is a pressing movement, so there's not that much focus on or isolation on the triceps movement. Okay. Overall, this is a pretty suboptimal choice that for training the triceps. I think that this is even inferior to close grip bench press, because at least with close grip bench press, you can increase the weight as you need to in increments to give you more progressive overload. But you can't really do this with this exercise unless you come in with a backpack or a spotter. Okay, overload is going to be capped at body weight, and stretch and contraction are going to be minimal. Again, the awkward positioning of the hands is even worse positioning than close bench press, because this positioning puts the hands literally close together. So you're super hyperextending the wrist, which gives you higher chance of injury. And of course, when the wrist comes closer together, you get less and less chest involvement, so you're going to have lower overload. I wouldn't recommend this exercise at all. I think it's one of the worst you can do to try to build your triceps. I'm going to give this one a D. Okay, standing overhead easy bar extension. I would definitely prefer you do these be done with an easy bar as opposed to a barbell. And the reason, because the easy bar has a natural semi-supinated grip, and it just feels more comfortable on your wrists. And it's just better for like arm training overall. Okay. Progressive overload, easy to add weight to the easy bar. You can do it in any type of increment that you want to do. You can do 2 pounds, you can do 5 pounds, you can do 45 pounds. Okay. As for stretch, this is the best stretch of any tricep exercise by far. Again, the triceps are stretched really well when the arms start above the head like this. Okay. And that's why you're really stretching that long head right there. Okay. And this is the biggest triceps muscle, and it gives it a big appearance. So when you really want to grow your triceps, the secret is you basically want to focus on the long head, because that's the biggest tricep muscle. It actually makes about 50% of the mass of the triceps, okay? And it's the best stretch of any tricep exercise, and raising your arms overhead stretches it. This is a great contraction. And then another thing about this exercise is that it's not super strict either, because you're going to have slight shoulder movement at the top, and this will give you additional tension and overload. Unlike the diamond push-ups or triceps, completely eliminate the chest, or the kickback, which eliminates just everything. It's not overly strict like those exercises. Okay. As a focus on target muscle, this is definitely the best movement to target the long head as it crosses the shoulder joint. And another variation of this is what's called the skull crushers, which is basically the same thing but laying down. Okay. Overall, this is a fantastic exercise. This is the best stretch of any exercise by far. The best movement for the long head. Again, makes it 50% of the triceps. If you're trying to blow up your triceps, you have to do a movement that targets the long head. This is definitely a must for any bodybuilding program. I highly recommend, and I give this an S tier. I think it is the best movement that can do for the triceps by far, if you're really trying to like focus and isolate on the triceps. Okay, so to recap and summarize, we're basically, when we're trying to train the triceps, we're looking for a movement that has a great stretch, a great contraction, and maximum overload while placing the wrist in a comfortable position. And that's why overhead bar extensions are king. Well, that concludes it for the video. Thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and see you all soon.